I have dominion over what my thinking shall be. If I permit the old habit of trying to fix myself to govern this moment, it will perpetuate its own trouble, and I will be as one who beats the air. I cannot permit this. I must maintain my God-given dominion and withdraw the personal hand that would meddle. Therefore, I in this instant assume conscious dominion over mind and body and declare, be still. Be still and know that I am God. Not Joel, not a self-improver, not a fixer. I, the living presence that is closer than breathing, that which spoke, I am that I am. Now listen, the great discovery is not a poem. It is an observable event. The instant I stop trying, something else begins. In the very second I let the strain drop, I feel the shoulders sink of themselves, the breath lengthens without my coaching, the pulse of awareness rises from the chest as if to say, I was governing all along. Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. Do you hear that? Might is the trying. Power is the push. Spirit is the government I surrender to when I cease interfering. What is this trying that has so nobly disguised itself as virtue? It is mental pressure. It is the personal mind installing itself as foreman over life, self-correction, self-criticism, self-engineering, fear-driven effort that believes, if I do not fix, I will fail. If I do not manage, I will be overcome. And because that belief is entertained, the struggle remains alive. Trying is the rope that keeps the bell ringing. Pull once more, and the clang must answer. Pull not at all. And listen, silence takes the field. Do not mistake me, and do not deceive yourself. I am not speaking of laziness. I am speaking of government, of a transfer of government from the personal sense to the deeper I. The personal mind says, I will do better prayers. I will tighten my attention. I will hold the thought. But I will not permit that swashbuckler in spiritual clothing. It feeds the very ego that suffers. I must stand as porter at the door of thought and say, nothing enters here that defiles, that accuses, that demands a human fixing. I do not force life, I guard entrance. I admit only the awareness of I. Now, yes, here is your direct correction. Do not make this my oneness with God as a phrase to be stroked in the head. Did you hear? Not my oneness as a concept. My conscious oneness now. Now without a push, without a strain. Be still and know. Let the knowing arise of itself out of the chest. All of the words come from the head. The word I comes up out of the very breath. When I allow that, I find rest already present. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Labor is the trying. Rest is the presence, revealing itself as the only activity. I confess to you, I had my long, long periods of practice in which the habit of strain tried to master me. I tightened the jaw. I argued with thoughts. I prayed hard with clenched fists. And it may still, on some mornings, attempt its old rule, but not for long. I snap out of it by remembering the government is upon his shoulder. I withdraw my hand, and the quiet assumes the throne at once. Peace that passes understanding does not arrive because I labored for it. It appears because I ceased to obstruct it. Therefore, I say, I cannot heal myself by strain. I will not attempt to add 1 cubit to my stature by thought. I will not improve the lotus by tugging its petals. I drop the rope, I loose the grip, I let the heart announce its king. And in that surrender I discover identity. I then am the rest. I then am the peace. I then am the gentle governance that heals. Not an egotistical I, not an I that boasts, but the I of oneness, for in him we live and move and have our being, and that him is my very selfhood, universal and indivisible. Now, in this breath, cease. Let the trying stop. Hear the hush rise. Feel the presence assume its own work. Strain cannot produce peace. The cessation of strain reveals the peace that is. And I, standing as porter, consent. Now let us be honest and anatomical about this thing called trying, because if I am to stand as porter, I must know what prowls at the gate. What am I doing when I try? I am installing a personal foreman over life, and I am ordering mind, body, and tomorrow to behave by the lash of thought. I say, hold that thought, push that symptom, squeeze that fear out, pull that future in. That is manipulation. That is the creature attempting to govern the Creator's handiwork. Which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit unto his stature? The master asked, and I must answer, none. Therefore, I cannot permit this tenant, this would-be governor, to sit on the throne of my inner government. Now, yes, this trying often comes dressed in Sunday clothes. It says, I will become holy. I will get still if it kills me. I will grind myself into surrender. Do you hear the swashbuckler in that? That is not the gentle I. That is the egotistical I, the I that boasts of its fasting, of its hours, of its gains, as if spirituality were a bank book to be balanced. Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them, is not only about coins in a cup. It is about the inner parade that believes, I, by my effort, will reach God. That is the carnal mind. And the carnal mind is enmity against God. I will not let that enmity govern my practice. I put up the sword. I refuse the braggart rescuer who marches in to save me from me. Let me repeat, because here is the diagnosis. Trying is the personal self attempting to compel harmony by thought force. It tenses the jaw, quickens the breath, narrows the gaze, and turns the mind into an antenna for world thought. In that state, I am no longer a tiler over my temple. I am a receiver tuned to fear, to comparison, to 1,000 urgent suggestions that are not mine. I catch the contagion of headlines and the whisper of neighbors and the ghosts of my childhood, and I call it guidance. But it is not guidance, it is noise. It is vulnerability masquerading as diligence. Take no thought for the morrow, the Christ commands, because thought-taking imports tomorrow's anxiety into today's sanctuary and sets it up on the altar as if it were worthy of sacrifice. Do you see how trying multiplies the very thing I would end? I pull the rope to stop the bell, and the bell answers with another clang. I count the breaths to force them to be slow, and the counting is the weight that makes them short. I measure my progress against yours, and thereby carve separation where none exists. And in that imagined separation I must defend, and in that defense I must strive, and in that striving I must try again. Round and round the axle of self-improvement I turn, heating the wheel with the very friction I despise. This is why I say, most trying is egoic governance disguised as virtue, and it keeps the trouble in circulation. Now I correct myself, and you with me. This must be a gentle I, a quiet, unboastful presence that does not wrestle life but witnesses it. Not Joel's cleverness, not a spiritual athlete polishing medals of insight, a gentle I that says, be still, and does not raise its voice. A gentle I that stands at the door and will not let the accusing suggestion enter, not by pushing back, but by not consenting. Thou shalt have no other gods before me includes this. I shall not enthrone my own will as a god of outcome. I shall not pray to a concept of success or a picture of health and ask it to save me. I shall not sacrifice my peace upon the altar of becoming. And here comes the pivot upon which the rest of our work turns. If I see that trying is the impostor on the throne, if I lay down the lash and end the parade, what then governs? When I stop forcing breath, who breathes? When I stop commanding thought, who knows? When I leave tomorrow to itself, who orders its appearing? The government shall be upon his shoulder, Scripture says, and I have felt that shoulder nearer than the breath. But I must ask it of myself in this moment, not as poetry, but as practice. If I do not try to fix myself, what replaces effort? What actually assumes government? Let that question stand at the door with you now, and do not answer from the head. Wait, listen. I will show you the government not with words, but with the quiet that follows the end of trying. Therefore I take my post, not as a striver, not as a fixer, but as porter. I in this instant assume conscious dominion over mind and body, and I say with quiet authority, I do not force life, I guard entrance. There shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, the revelation declares of the holy city. In like manner, I stand at the gate of my consciousness as tiler over this temple. I cannot permit the parade of anxious images to march in unchallenged. I cannot allow world thought to occupy the altar. I, in this gentle I, grant or deny consent. Healing begins here not by managing outcomes, but by governing what I consent to think. Now, how do I do this without turning the gate into a battlefield? I do it by withdrawing consent, not by wrestling. I take my stance and let the knocking be the knocking. Set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth. Keep the door of my lips, and I add, keep the door of my thoughts. A thought appears. Something is wrong with me. Hurry, control it. I do not argue. I do not polish it with attention. I name it for what it is, an impersonal suggestion, not mine, not Joel's flaw, a stray impulse seeking outlet. Get thee behind me, Satan, is not a melodrama. It is a refusal to identify. I release it. I let it drop. And because I deny it residence, it cannot furnish this house. Listen to the practice, because practice makes this real. Sit as you are. I stand with you now as porter. On the exhale, without strain, let the word I breathe itself, gentle, unvoiced. Feel where it rises from the chest, closer than breathing. Any thought that knocks, whether about body, supply, reputation, tomorrow, I ask, do I consent to host this? If there is tension in it, accusation in it, fear in it, I answer, no. Not by debate, by non-consent. I do not push it out, I simply do not invite it in. Watch then, your shoulders will sink uncommanded. Your breathing will lengthen of itself. That is the evidence of governance returning to its rightful king. Be still and know that I am God means precisely this. The knowing arrives as the stillness appears, not as a product of strain. Now, yes, there will be knocks that seem convincing. Pain calling itself mine. Memory calling itself me. News calling itself urgent. In that very moment, I refuse personalization. Let me repeat, that error is impersonal. It is hypnotism, mesmerism, suggestion, wind at the door. The porter does not indict the wind. He merely keeps the latch. I do not blame myself for the suggestion, nor do I blame another as its author. I release blame altogether and keep dominion. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Diligence is not tension. Diligence is steadiness at the gate. This office is not a one-time oath. It is a moment-by-moment assumption of government until it becomes as natural as breathing. Every hour, I quietly reassume my post. A whisper arises, I notice. Name, and let it pass. A sweetness arises, I notice. Bow, and let it abide. I am not making peace. I am refusing to host that which disturbs peace. Take no thought for the morrow is my operating law. I do not import tomorrow's ghosts into today's sanctuary. I remain here, at the door, and the government rests upon his shoulder. His that inner eye, which is not personal, not boastful, but universal presence. So I declare again, and you with me, I stand here the porter at the door of thought. Nothing shall enter my mind or body that defileth, accuseth, or demandeth a human fixing. I do not force life, I guard entrance, and as I guard, the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, keeps my heart and mind as silently and certainly as breath returns when the grasping stops. Now I take you to the root of this governance, because I cannot stand long at the door if my mind still kneels before its own words. As long as I hold the word God in my head, as long as I cherish power, supply, health, healing as picture ideas, I stay in the gallery of images and miss the sanctuary. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image is not only about stone and wood, it is about the mental idol I carve from syllables and then worship in the mind. The letter killeth, the spirit giveth life. When I cling to the letter, I suffocate the spirit with pious vocabulary. I cannot permit that. Therefore, I gently let the words go, not by force, by release. I let God as a three-letter word fall back into silence. I let spirit as a six-letter wind return to the wind. I am not losing God. I am dropping the veil I stitched from sound. Now listen very carefully. When the words fall away, there is one word I cannot make fall. There is one word that refuses to be a mere word. I. Do you hear where it arises? Not from the head where concepts jostle. It rises from the chest, closer than breathing, gentler than the whisper in the lungs. If you will be still for half a breath, you will find it lifting, not as a thought about God, but as the presence that knows before thought. Before Abraham was, I am. Not I, Joel, not the personality with its scrapbook of yesterdays and plans for tomorrow. I, the living one, announcing itself without syllables, the very life that animates this breath, this looking, this awareness. Do not mistake me and do not make a swashbuckler of this I. It has to be a gentle I, not boastful, not the personal self dressing in divine titles. When I declare I am not crowning Joel, I am unmasking Joel. I am revealing the universal self in which Joel appears and disappears as a wave in the sea. I and the Father are one is not my diploma, it is the fact of being. Christ in you, the hope of glory, is not a theology, it is the actual presence of this I as your very selfhood and as mine. There is no my life and thy life in this awareness. There is only life as I, endlessly being itself, endlessly manifest as all. Now, yes, how do I come to this I without turning the coming into another try? I do not climb, I do not reach, I do not decorate the silence with adjectives. I simply yield attention from the head toward the chest and let the word I breathe itself on the exhale, unvoiced, unfurled, unforced. I, and let it be. Do it now without doing. If you will, even for 10 quiet seconds, you will notice that something proves itself. The breath grows longer of its own accord. The shoulders release without a command. The mind settles as if a lake were dropping its ripples. This is not the product of a technique. This is the evidence of government returning to its rightful king. The kingdom of God is within you. Where? Within. Here, where I rises closer than breathing, nearer than the next thought. Let me say it again so that you do not lose the path in poetry. As long as I hold to concepts of God, I am handling pictures in the mind. When concepts drop away, the living I remain. And that I is the doorway to effortless presence. I am the door, the Master said. He did not say a door to somewhere else. He said, I am the door, as in right here, the opening where the head yields and the heart knows. Therefore I assume my gentle dominion and refuse to enthrone words where only being belongs. I let every sacred synonym fall into its source until only I stands quiet, luminous, self-knowing. And standing there without trying, without strain, the peace that passes understanding declares itself, and the healing action begins by itself. Stand still, and you will know. Stand still, and you will discover that I was already here, governing before you spoke one holy word. Now sit as you are, and do not fix a single thing. I cannot permit the old manager to straighten the spine, to square the shoulders, to count the seconds, that is, the swashbuckler disguised as piety. I assume gentle dominion, and I say, be as you are for this moment. I do not reach for a better breath. I do not press the mind to obey. I simply notice any strain as an activity, and I discontinue it. In returning and rest shall ye be saved. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength. Let us return. Breathe gently. Breathe slowly. And always on the exhale. Let the exhale be surrender, not control. Do you hear? Not a pushing down, not a shaping of the air, but a letting go, as if the breath knew how to leave of itself. On the exhale, if you will, let the word I arise unvoiced, like a feather leaving the hand, not as a mantra to accomplish anything, but as recognition of what is already here, I, and let it be. Again, I, and let it be. Now, yes, the mind may knock with its errands. Am I doing this right? Is it working? But we stand at the door as porter, and we do not consent. We do not argue with the thought. We do not decorate it. We let it pass as wind at the gate. Another exhale. I be still and know that I am God. The stillness is the knowing, and the knowing is the stillness. They arrive together when effort stops. Feel what occurs without your help. The jaw releases by itself. The eyes soften of their own accord. The breath of its own wisdom lengthens as if a lake forgot how to ripple. Do not help it. Let it breathe gently, breathe slowly, and always on the exhale, I. The moment you stop trying to make quiet, quiet assumes government. The government shall be upon his shoulder. I recognize that shoulder in this very hush. If you must have a sign, here is your sign. When your breathing becomes slower, quieter, almost imperceptible, that is your evidence that you are not trying, and presence is functioning. When the exhale slips out like a tide returning home and you do not run after it to bring it back, that is the mark. When the body sits without instruction and the mind ceases its rehearsals, that is the proof. Peace, be still is not a command you shout at water. It is the whisper that appears when you drop the rope. Let me repeat, so the habit of accomplishment does not steal this from you. Do not fix, do not reach. Simply notice any tightening as a thing being done and cease doing it. The instant you discontinue the activity of strain, you discover that stillness was present before you noticed it. The breath only testifies. The Spirit of God hath made me, and the breath of the Almighty hath given me life. I am not manufacturing spirit, I am witnessing its effortless act. Again now, a few breaths as demonstration, not as exercise. On the exhale, I let the shoulders fall of themselves. On the exhale, I let the chest float down without order. On the exhale, I let the mind have nothing to do. If thoughts come, they come. If they go, they go. You stand at the door and you do not entertain either guest. You do not prefer stillness to motion. You merely withdraw consent from the manager and watch the king take the throne. Do you feel it? A mild weight in the seat, a warm wideness in the chest, The breath so fine you almost forget to notice it. This is not an achievement. This is the cessation of interference. This is grace at work, before words, beyond your management. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. I stand, I see, and the seeing is rest. Now carry this knowing not as a technique to be performed, but as a government to be recognized. At any bell of anxiety, at any rumor of lack, do not fix exhale. Breathe gently, breathe slowly, and always on the exhale let I affirm itself, not loudly, not boastfully, but as the very life you are. Stillness is not achieved by effort. It is revealed the instant effort stops, and the breath bears witness, true and faithful, that the living presence is governing here. Now I answer you plainly. What replaces effort is grace, not a force I summon, not a mood I manufacture, not a technique I perfect. Grace as government, presence assuming its rightful administration of mind and body the instant the personal sense lays down its tools. It is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. Do you hear? Worketh in you not as your management, but as the life that is already living you. Therefore, I cannot permit the meddler to return with clipboards and inspections. I withdraw the foreman, I stand as porter, and I let the king govern. What does this feel like? Not excitement, not fireworks. It is quiet authority. It is an inner yes that needs no trumpet, an assurance that does not argue. It is a settling, as if all the furniture of life were being placed by an unseen hand exactly where it belongs. The breath deepens without my counting. The chest warms without my lighting the fire. The mind stops its rehearsals and becomes a clear window. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He restoreth my soul. This is not lethargy. This is governance. This is the presence reordering its own household. Now, yes, here is the paradox that shames the ego. I do not heal me. I yield, and I witness that the I, which constitutes life, restores harmony by being itself, trying crowds the channel, will blocks the doorway by standing in it. The moment I step aside, not out of apathy, but out of reverence, the river runs. I am the Lord that healeth thee is not a future promise. It is a present fact the instant I stop impersonating lordship. Let me repeat. I do not add power to God. I cease obstructing the only power there is. Watch how grace operates when consent is withdrawn from fear, not by wrestling symptoms, not by pushing thoughts, but by a quiet writing. The breath writes itself. The heart quiets of its own wisdom. A thought that accused 3 minutes ago now has no claimant. Order arises not from my arranging, but from presence being presence. Behold, I make all things new. I do not make, I behold. And in the beholding, the newness appears of its own accord, because the king is on the throne and the porter is merely keeping the door clear. Now I correct a subtle misstep that would rob you of this government. Do not turn to the body to check whether grace is working. Watching is trying. Monitoring is meddling. If you take the pulse of outcomes every few breaths, you have already handed the keys back to the foreman. Take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, nor yet for your body. Includes this inward audit. I must not sue the body for progress. I must not subpoena the moment to testify in my favor. I remain at the door. I keep the house uncongested. I let the unseen government do its quiet, unfailing work. And if the old habit rushes into measure, I stand and say no, not by debate, by non-consent. I return attention to I rising in the chest on the gentle exhale. I let the breath testify rather than the senses. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. My burden is not only pain or lack, it is the very urge to manage outcome. I lay that on the altar, and I do not snatch it back with anxious eyes. I trust the government that has never failed a blade of grass nor missed a turn of the earth. Therefore I declare, not as a swashbuckler, but as a gentle I then am the resurrection and the life functioning here, not Joel working on Joel, but life revealing its own wholeness as this consciousness, as this body, as this hour. I will restore health unto thee, and I will heal thee of thy wounds, saith the Lord. I do not coerce that restoration. I do not schedule it. I do not announce it to the senses. I remain still. I remain porter, and I let grace govern. And as surely as the tide returns to the shore without your help, the harmony appears not because I strain for it, but because I stop standing in its way. Now I purify the atmosphere of thought, because even after stillness has shown itself, the old prosecutor may try to convene court again. Hear me, and let me repeat it until it sinks past the head. Error is impersonal. Fear is impersonal. Compulsion is impersonal. Shame, sickness, suggestion, accusation, impersonal. Hypnotism, mesmerism, suggestion, world thought, looking for a host. Never identity, never I. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, the apostle wrote, but against principalities, against powers. And I translate that as the sway of suggestion, not the self of anyone. Therefore, I cannot permit my mind to paste a name and a face on a fog and then conduct a trial of persons. I, in this instant, assume dominion, and I classify such appearances as wind at the door. Wind is not a resident. Wind is not a self. I do not indict the wind, I keep the latch. First inward, I end the trial of myself. Do you recognize how the personal sense drags me into a courtroom, sets me as judge and jury and witness against myself, calling evidence from yesterday's and dread from tomorrow's? That is trying by punishment. That is the foreman with a gavel. I cannot permit it. There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus. Who shall lay anything to the charge of God's elect? It is God that justifieth. I then withdraw the charge. I voluntarily dismiss the case. I name the accuser not as me, not as conscience purified by spirit, but as mesmerism, repeating an old story for effect. Shame is suggestion. Compulsion is suggestion. Fear is suggestion. I do not argue. I do not defend. I refuse consent. I let it drop. And in the very instant of dropping, the breath lengthens of itself. The jaw releases. The heart quiets not as reward, but as the natural condition when the lash is put down. Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more, is the voice within me, ending the inner prosecution and revealing that repentance is a change of consciousness, not a sentence served. Now outward. I end the trial of my brother, my sister, my government, my neighbor, my past. Let me repeat that error is impersonal. They were but instruments through which an impersonal hypnotism sought outlet. If I stamp their name on the fog, I must fight a phantom and suffer for it. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, is not sentimental. It is spiritual diagnosis. Judge not, that ye be not judged, is practical law. As I withhold the gavel is withheld from me, because the only judge in this house is the eye that knows no adversary. We do not wrestle with flesh and blood. We keep the door against suggestion, and compassion becomes inevitable when no person is made the culprit. Conflict loses its basis when separation loses its language. My interests are your interests. There is no my health and thy health. There is only the life that is I, appearing as us. How then shall I raise a sword against my own hand? Put up thy sword. Understand the mechanism now. Blame is effort. Blame is tension. Blame is trying to force a universe of one by dividing it into accuser and accused. The moment I blame, breath shortens, shoulders rise, the porter abandons his post to prosecute a case that has no defendant. Withdraw blame and stillness returns to its own. Release condemnation and grace resumes government. This is not passivity, this is purification. I am not excusing, I am exposing error as suggestion and refusing it residence. I am not making wrong right. I am declining to feed wrong with my attention. And in that fasting, the appearance starves for lack of my consent. Take this as training. The next time an accusing thought about you or about another approaches the gate, do not dress it in robes of righteousness. Name it impersonal suggestion. Breathe gently, breathe slowly. And always on the exhale let I arise, unvoiced, closer than breathing. Say within, not mine, not his, not hers, not a self at all. Let it drop. Watch then, peace will prove itself, not by your power, but by the absence of your interference. Charity thinketh no evil. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Purity is impersonal seeing. It refuses to paste personhood onto a fog. And in that purity, I then am mercy, I then am light, I then am the quiet government of grace carrying this house without strain. Now follow me into the wideness that makes compassion inevitable, because once the gavel is laid down, the room grows larger than me and thee. I cannot permit the mind to shrink back into private ownership of life, health, supply, or hope. I say it as law. There is not my life and your life. There is one life appearing as many. I and the Father are one, and because there is only one I then am thyself. My interests are your interests. There is no my health and thy health. There is only health as I. There is no my supply and thy supply. There is only supply as the infinity of good. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. And because I am in God, and God is the life of me, all that fullness is the one treasury from which every appearing is drawn. All things are yours, and ye are Christ's, and Christ is God's. Therefore, quarreling and competing become illogical in the light of oneness. A hand does not sue its other hand to receive what the one life is giving both. Do you see how this ends strain? Most trying is protectionism. It is the personal sense fortifying itself behind little walls, guarding a private pantry, watching through narrowed eyes for thieves that do not exist in a universe of one. Separation births vigilance. Vigilance breeds tension. Tension breeds the very symptoms it fears. But in the universal I, what is there to defend? Of whom shall I be afraid if I am thyself? Perfect love casteth out fear, not by might, but because love recognizes no second self to threaten or be threatened. The breath lengthens of its own accord when I release the patrol. The heart quiets when the borders dissolve. I no longer try to be safe. I abide in the safety of the one. In him we live and move and have our being. That being is not parceled into guarded lots. It is indivisible, life being itself as us. Now, yes, hear the caution that keeps this from swelling the ego. Unity is not personal grandeur. It is not a swashbuckler's claim to cosmic titles. It has to be a gentle I, not an egotistical I. He that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. I do not enlarge Joel. I surrender Joel into the universal self that already is. Put up thy sword, because nothing real is threatened in oneness. The sword is the symbol of separation. I lay it down. The minute I take up spiritual language to win an argument or to increase my estate at the expense of another, I have denied the very I profess. The universal I knows no adversary, therefore I cannot posture as conqueror and call it God. Let me bring it to practice so it ceases to be poetry. When I look upon my brother, my sister, my competitor, my debtor, I train myself to say within, gently, I am thyself. My interests are your interests. I cannot be enriched by your deprivation, nor can you be enriched by mine. Freely ye have received. Freely give, because giving and receiving are the one motion of I. When I pay, I am supplied. When I forgive, I am released. When I withhold, I constrict my own vein. There is no outside to the one. Therefore I cease all inner haggling. I lay down the ledger, and I let grace's government determine the flow. And it will, without my bargaining, because your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. And in the household of the one, provision goes where function calls, without favoritism, without fear. Now notice what has happened. The compulsion to manage, to hoard, to prove, to defend has lost its assignment. Struggle ends where separation ends. In the universal I, fear-driven effort has no purpose because there is no second will contending with the first. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not to a few, not to me against thee, but to the one self appearing as us. I rest, and in that rest the same I that heals me is the I that heals all. For there are not two lives to rescue, only life revealing itself where I have stopped pretending we are two. Be of good cheer. It is I, be not afraid. Now I ask you to take the doctrine out of the clouds and let the earth itself preach it to you. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. Do you hear the law of effortless right action in that? The grass pushes through the soil without a plan. The tree unfolds its leaf without a meeting. Birds rise when the season turns and trace a path they never memorized. Where did they learn? Who counts the beats of a wing across 1,000 miles of open sky? He that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. I recognize that keeper as the living I, the quiet government that is life being life without your prompting and without mine. Therefore I cannot permit the personal sense to stand on the shore and shout orders at the tide. The tide comes and goes by a governance older than your worry and wiser than your maps. Bring it nearer. The body testifies every hour that life is already governing. You do not grow your nails by decision. You do not instruct your hair to lengthen in the night. You do not stand over a wound with blueprints, and yet the edges draw together, the skin knits, the color returns. The heart keeps house at 3 a.m. The lungs receive and release. The stomach dissolves and apportions without Joel's clipboard. The life is more than meat, and the body is more than raiment. I do not manufacture life, I witness life. I do not heal. I stop interfering and behold healing as the body's native obedience to its source. I am the Lord that healeth thee. Not later, not if I strain correctly now, whenever the foreman has been withdrawn from the floor and the government reassumes the throne. Now, yes, I must tell you the truth about thought, so that you do not attribute to it a creative power it does not possess. Thought is not the maker of life. Thought is a door. It can consent to what already is, or it can obstruct by entertaining fear, blame, and management. That is why I stand as porter at the door of thought. I do not let anxiety run its freight through this gate. I do not let accusation store its crates in this warehouse. Take no thought for your life is practical instruction. Your taking of thought cannot add 1 cubit to your stature, but it can shorten your breath and jam the channel. The moment I discontinue the activity of strain, circulation finds its rhythm, digestion takes its quiet steps, the nervous system remembers its Sabbath. Not because I commanded it, but because I ceased to command. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. Therefore I give you an observation practice that turns the common hour into sanctuary. As you walk past the patch of grass, say within, gently, I am the life of this grass. When you hear a bird call at dawn, I am the life of this singing. When the kettle warms and the unseen turns water to cloud, I am the life of this rising. When your nails show their pale crescent, I am the life of this growth. Not as magic words, as recognition. Breathe gently, breathe slowly. And always on the exhale, let I acknowledge itself closer than breathing. Let this be your manner through the day. Windowsill plant, passing cloud, beating heart, quiet step. In him we live and move and have our being. Watch how anxiety becomes the stranger and presence the neighbor you greet without effort. Do not swell with titles as you do this. It has to be a gentle I, not a swashbuckler. I am the vine, ye are the branches. I then am the sap that moves without instruction. I then am the fruitfulness that appears without strain. And as this seeing ripens, you will notice that life proves itself everywhere without your push and without your fear, and your task reduces to holy simplicity. Stop resisting what already functions. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. I accept that ease as law. I lay down the heavy trying. I stand at the door. I behold, and in the beholding, the ordinary world becomes Scripture, and the Scripture becomes your very breath, quietly declaring that grace is government here. Now I speak to you as one who has walked this in shoe leather, not as a lecturer above the weather. I had my long periods of practice. I will not pretend that the habit of trying did not and does not sometimes rush back in and take the chair. Sometimes it may get the best of me for a few breaths, for a few minutes, perhaps even for an hour when the world noise is loud, but not for long. I snap out of it. I do not mean by heroics. I mean I remember, I return. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholdeth him with his hand. The fall is not failure. The refusal to return is the only delay. Therefore, I cannot permit the ego to use relapse as proof of separation. I name it practice. I name it training. I name it the bell that calls me back to quiet government. Now hear what success is, so that the swashbuckler does not counterfeit it. Success is not that I never try again. Success is that I notice faster, I return sooner, I refuse to dwell in the strain. Yesterday I may have lived an hour under a tight jaw and a high chest before I remembered. Today I catch it in 2 minutes, tomorrow in 2 breaths. That is victory. His mercies are new every morning. New mercy, new return. I measure not by outcomes on the surface, but by the promptness of turning within. I measure not by how few thoughts come, but by how quickly I withdraw consent from the ones that do. I do not polish a halo, I practice a return. Take this as a simple reset, and keep it so simple that you cannot complicate it. First, recognize strain. How do I recognize it? Breath shortened, shoulders lifted, stomach braced as if bracing could hold back the tide. Mind rehearsing, hurrying, prosecuting. That is the sign. Second, label it rightly. Impersonal suggestion. Not my failure, not your offense, not a fact. Hypnotism seeking a host. Third, soften the exhale. Breathe gently. Breathe slowly. And always on the exhale. No pushing down a relinquishment as if letting a bird out of the hand. Fourth, let the word I arise on the exhale unvoiced, closer than breathing, I. Fifth, resume portership. I stand at the door of thought. I consent to nothing accusatory, nothing fearful, nothing managerial. I do not argue. I do not decorate. I let it pass as wind. Return unto thy rest, O my soul. That is the whole sequence. Recognize, name, exhale, I, and keep the door. Now I must warn you against the subtlest relapse of all, spiritual performance. That is the personal sense, putting on a robe and a badge and making a scorecard of holiness. How many returns today? How quickly? How deep was the stillness? That is trying investments. I cannot permit it. Monitoring is meddling. Auditing is anxiety with sacred language. Take no thought even of your progress. The practice is surrender, not achievement. Recognition, not production. The government shall be upon his shoulder, not upon your stopwatch. If I catch myself counting, I smile. I drop the beads. I return to the exhale. I let I speak itself without volume, without display. I decline to subpoena the body to testify that it is working. I do not check the pulse of grace. I am not making anything happen. I am ceasing to interfere with what is already happening. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. The drawing nigh is the dropping of strain. The nearness is revealed, not created. And if anger rises, or fear, or fatigue, if a headline agitates me, if a memory reproaches me, if temptation invites me, understand this is the bell, not the enemy, the bell. 7 times 70 I return. Be still and know that I am God. I do not argue with the wave. I drop the rope. The wave spends itself without my help. Each time I stop trying, presence resumes its work. Each time I lay down the sword, peace appears not as a prize, but as what was always here when the hand opened. This is realism, and this is training. Prompt return is the path. I will not be ashamed of practice. I will not be discouraged by relapse. I will be faithful in the small turnings, because the king needs no time to take the throne the instant the porter clears the doorway. Now we seal it with a simple discipline that asks nothing of you but the cessation of asking 7 days, morning, midday, evening, not as a contest, not as a vow you boast about, but as a quiet remembrance. Each pause is 3 minutes. If you must count, let a clock count for you, not your mind. Sit or stand where you are. Close the door of the room if you can. If not, close the door of attention. And then do not try. This is not production. This is discontinuation. Take no thought. Let the foreman step down from the scaffolding. Let the porter take his place at the door of thought. In each pause, the method is this. First, assume the office. I stand as the porter. I will not force life. I will guard the entrance. Second, I refuse entrance to fear thought, accusation thought, management thought. I do not argue. I do not decorate. I let it pass as wind. Third, breathe gently. Breathe slowly, and always on the exhale. Let the exhale be relinquishment, not control, as if releasing a bird from the hand. Fourth, allow the word I to arise, unvoiced, closer than breathing from the chest, the place where life already proves itself, not God as a word, not phrases, only I. Fifth, rest. No monitoring, no checking the pulse of grace. Be still and know that I am God. Knowing happens when trying stops. Stillness is revealed the instant effort ceases. Now I give you your field work, for truth must breathe in conversation, or it remains a museum piece. During these 7 days, in every conversation, especially the heated ones, the hurried ones, the ones with money, with family, with deadlines, practice unity silently while the other is speaking, while the email is loading, while the memory is rising. Say within as breath flows out, my interests are your interests. I am thyself. Put up thy sword. Watch what occurs. The jaw releases. The chest warms. The instinct to win dissolves because there is no second self to conquer in the light of I. Perfect love casteth out fear, not by force, but by ending the fiction of two. Turn ordinary thresholds into sanctuaries. The moment you place your hand on a doorknob, breathe out and let I arise. At red lights, breathe out and let I arise. In the checkout line, breathe out and let I arise. When a headline shouts, breathe out and let I arise. You are not adding power, you are ceasing to block the only power there is. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, he restoreth my soul. Restoration is not a project. It is a government assuming its own throne when the aisles are cleared. I will not pretend that the mind will not rush in to measure how deep today, how many pauses, smile, drop the beads, resume portership, gently exhale, I. If you forget a pause, do not scold. Return at the next bell, morning, midday, evening. His mercies are new every morning. New mercies, new returns. Prompt return is the path. At the end of these 7 days, do not audit your holiness. Do not subpoena outcome. Look instead for the marks of government. Breath that often becomes almost imperceptible without your watching. A soft readiness at the door of thought. A tenderness toward the passerby because you recognize, I am thyself. Notice that effort has lost its assignment. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. Renewal comes not by strain, but by waiting, by the discontinuation of meddling. Regeneration appears as order reasserting itself where you have stopped arranging. Resurrection is simply life rising where the stone of trying has been rolled away. Behold, I make all things new. I then am the quiet law of newness here, not Joel promoted, but presence unopposed. And the government shall be upon his shoulder for 7 days, and then for the 8th, that is every day, let that shoulder carry you. Breathe gently. Stand as porter. Let I be I. And you will discover that stillness is not a visit, it is home.